Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you live from NASCAR headquarters. Hope you once again had a great holiday weekend. And first and foremost, I definitely want to thank everyone for your support of 500 Days, now with 2 installations out. Part 2 just debuted just last night. Part 1 last week. So we now have a combined, I believe we're up to about 5 hours. Maybe just under 5 hours thereabouts of content, with part 3 still to come next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific, on this very channel here. If you are a member of the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock, you can watch part 3 anytime, like after the show here tonight, between now and January 4th, and the premiere coming up next week there. Absolutely overwhelmed by the response. I mean, I was, with part 1, I was worried that part 1 was going to be something that was going to be too much of a niche interest and only going to be something that maybe, major geeks into the sport like myself would be into, with all the back and forth on the silly season there. But I was very, very impressed with the response to that. I mean, we're up to about, I think 28,000 views on that in its first week. Really, really very surprised on that one. I was worried that was going to be the weakest of the parts, and I was thinking about adding music to it or something to kind of jazz it up a little bit. But I felt like if I added any more than that, that was probably going to be kind of distracting to the material that was in it. So I just said, okay, look, we're just going to have it just as is. We're going to put the graphics in to kind of help people out that maybe aren't as familiar with it. And I think that was the right decision, because I was very pleased with the response to that one. Chat was great that night. But part 2, I really enjoyed myself in chat last night in particular. It's the first time, as I mentioned, that I'd really watched that one cover to cover in just one sitting. I mean, I've replayed some portions over and over and over again, trying to polish it up there and, tweaking this and that and adding these different clips in. Re-recorded a couple segments there along the way. It very rarely had I seen the whole thing together. But when it was really fun interacting with people in the chat there. And I think that's something I really wanted to capture from that Speedweeks is that fun. I think that's something that's very easily what was forgotten, whereas part 1 was all about the silly season changes, and obviously all of that was definitely pushed to the background pretty quickly once we even got to the track there and people trying to figure out how the Dodge teams were going to be performing, if there was going to be any other surprises to handle the new super speedway package there at Daytona, if we were going to get a race like we had at Talladega. But once we started getting those answers, I think it really brought out the best of a lot of the competitors there that you had. It was that fun. I mean, you had a lot of drivers that were having just tremendous time out there. And you did have some drivers that were concerned about it. I think there's definitely the foreshadowing a lot of you caught right onto, and certainly the Earnhardt aspect is the biggest. But right up there as well is the concern about what risks there is in this form of racing. But what you've seen so far in this, for those of you, again, some spoilers if you haven't seen part 2 yet. I know it's only been the first day here. Definitely one thing that's an aspect of that is just, again, how competitive that package was, but how clean the racing was that week. We're not seeing really, really scary accidents or anything, or even multi-car accidents. I did leave out in the Truck Series portion of it, and I wanted to kind of tighten that up there a bit. There was a wreck in there. I think it had about 6 or 7 trucks in that, but that was easily the largest in terms of number of vehicles involved during that first week of Speedweeks at the stock car portion. The ARCA part was pretty clean. You had a couple cars flip upside down in the Goodyear Dash series. But really aggressive driving. And on the Cup Series side, though, everything was very, very clean. Practices very clean. The dual races with just very minor incidents along the way. And just great racing. At the very heart of it, for sure, was the man in black himself, Dale Earnhardt. And I think hopefully one thing that comes across, the more people see part 2 and get a chance to really kind of internalize a lot of the moments there, is, Earnhardt. I didn't want to make this the Earnhardt video or the Earnhardt series. Unavoidably, he's going to be a big part in this project, and certainly next week we bring things full circle with part 3. But this was not a driver that was just kind of all of a sudden having a good run in the Daytona 500 and, the finish of the race played out the way it did. This was a guy that was right at the top of his game, having a lot of fun, mixing it up with the reporters, being very open, a lot of interviews. There's some interviews in this part that are very long, and I wanted to kind of keep them in there because I think that there were segments in there where he really opened up a lot. And even the previous season, with all the controversies over the kill switches and the tragedies that happened that year, he wasn't nearly as open or seemingly as relaxed as he was during Speedweeks in 2001. It's a very different depiction. Dale Earnhardt was always very much a prankster and always, messing around with other drivers. But in terms of his openness with the media, that I think is very different in there. And it showed in his driving too. I mean, every single one of those events that he was entered in, whether it was the Bud Shootout, whether it was his qualifying race, whether it was even the IROC event at the end of the week there, he was a factor in each one of those and making the similar kind of moves in each one of them and just mixing it up. He's been a threat in each of them. May not have won each of them, but was definitely could have, if things turned out one way or another there. And that's something I really kind of wanted to show in this. And I felt like it was kind of coming across in that too. The other thing also is just the cast of characters and how well the Fox broadcast crew was showing these drivers at the time. You see a tremendous number of interviews. I think that they really wanted to kind of bring a lot of these different drivers, into the public consciousness and not just the big names. I mean, they could very easily do something similar to today and just focus on who were the biggest names back then. I mean, Dale Earnhardt, Dale Jarrett, Jeff Gordon, Jeff Burton, guys like that. But in this one, you also get interviews with Dave Marcus. You get interviews with Junie Donlavey, even, in respects to other team owners, not just drivers. Cal Wells has an interview in this, Ricky Craven, and just really trying to introduce you to everybody, which was no small task, given the fact that they had a 52-car entry list in that. And you really, even trying to, when putting this video together, something that's always really challenging in making a lot of these videos, especially from further back in racing history, you don't really have a lot of visuals to work with, which is why Brian Hallman at the BRH Racing Archives is absolutely invaluable, and what he has there. That's really kind of brought a lot of this together. But in this 2001 week, there's very few pictures that were used in the second part. Absolutely invaluable. And again, big thanks to not only Brian, but also to Mike Horn at the BRH Racing Archives there, the pictures that were provided on that to tie things together with Kenny Wallace and Jeff Purvis in the unsponsored entries. But so much else was actually covered. And it's just a matter of actually, there's multiple clips of it. When I was doing the research for this one, I really wanted to kind of I kept track of all these different timestamps of like different clips, like, ooh, this one looks really good, or this one looks really good. The trailer that I made initially showing, them testing Sterling Marlin's car and the crewman working on Andy Houston's car, that came together pretty quickly because you just had to just take a couple of them there and then try to add much more of them. And that's really, I think, a positive to the Fox crew that was working that week and really trying to show as many of these storylines as possible and developing them too. During this video, again, if you haven't seen it yet, what some of the other stories that developed during the week are the struggles of, I saw that it was mentioned here in the chat, about the struggles that the Roush Racing team faced and what they were trying to find a way to pick up speed. You'll always see this because, somebody's going to be the slowest, and it's not always the teams you expect. Jeremy Mayfield is another figure that stands out very much in this episode. A driver that just really had perplexing problems with speed and reliability during the week. And it's not just a Ford situation either. You got Chevrolet teams like Dave Marcus's team, like Midwest Transit Racing with Rick Mast, trying to find a way to kind of get into the field and facing some frustrations with the form of racing that existed that week. These are kind of interesting stories that really kind of tie a lot of that together. So again, kudos to the Fox group that was there back then. They really wanted to do this up at the absolute most. And that's what I kind of brought up a little bit during last week's show, is I think one thing that makes this race stand out just as much as what tragically happened on the final corner of the final lap was how invested everyone is. Everyone was all in. Everyone was all in And if that wasn't entirely clear from part one, I certainly hope that is from part two. Whether it's the networks, the sponsors, the manufacturers, anybody that had any connection to it. I mean, Ken Squire had a quote in the second part of this talking about this just being the what was used to be referred to as the redneck high holy days, and you had everybody coming out of the woodwork to come down to Daytona and trying to sign these different drivers to like make appearances at their track, or sign with this sponsor or whatever the deal was. And he brought it up kind of in the past, but I thought it was very relevant to the culture and what was going on in 2001. It may not have been as obvious at the time, because it was the current time. You never really think about what's happening right now as an element of history. And I guess that's probably one thing you could wonder looking back at this too, is like, did it feel like, it was really building to something? I think that, that could be argued from one person to the next, but I think that captured that pretty well. And Ken Squire, I'm glad that he was still allowed to be part of that Fox group that first year. I'm glad they didn't just leave him out completely, given his massive role in the sport and, doing a lot of the broadcast work even the year before. Of course, Mike Joy was already becoming more of a voice for CBS towards the end, but Ken Squire definitely being a factor in that too. But really, I mean, that's what I really wanted to kind of capture in this one, and I think that was a lot of what made that week so special and so significant. Really, before the 500 even started, before anything else. I remember that week. I mean, I was in high school back then, senior in high school, and it felt like they were building to something. Like it felt like this was exceptional. This was not the everyday. I mean, I'd watched the sport. Excuse me. I'd watched the sport since '91, but I'd only watch it like week to week for about a couple seasons. So my grasp of Speedweeks and the normal rhythm of it, was like a couple years here and there. 99, 2000 definitely stand out a bit more than some of the other years before. And yes, I didn't really see 98 live during a lot of that too. So, again, that just shows how bad my timing can be sometimes. But it was huge. I remember we had like some kind of newspaper project in one of my high school classes. I remember looking up the starting lineup for the dual races that Thursday and just remarking it, all the teams that were there and wondering how that was going to play out after, having a caution-free Budweiser shootout. That was kind of the thing. It was really an amazing time. Sorry about this, folks. I just need to get some more water, I guess. But no, it was goodness me, it was really something crazy on that. So but thank you so much, everyone that's been able to check the video out here. I think that it's I really wanted to make sure this felt as big as it really felt to me and to others around that time period, and especially for people that were too young to remember it, or just never got a chance to see it live, and who remember Dale Earnhardt just in the past tense. I think it's so important to kind of see the way he carried himself, like even in that last week of his career there, and just showing. I mean, you hear some of these quotes if you watch like Speed Channel's, I think the FS1 or Speed Channel, whichever incarnation it was at the time, did that the Day series. They did that one where they did the Hooters 500. They did the 2012 500. They did the 2001 500. And really bring it up that Earnhardt felt right with the world. He felt like, you had that interview with him and Darrell Waltrip. It's not in the video, but the other interview that was shown where he says he's got it all. He's had it all. He feels like, he was at a good place in his life. And that's definitely something that, it's hard to picture that separately in that just that interview. But when you see all these other clips, and again, you see the way he handles and the way he races. That was definitely the case that was going on, certainly at that time. But that's definitely something to see. Shoot, for sure. But yeah, that was that was a project that I've really been meaning to kind of get going and share with everybody. So I'm so glad that everybody was in the chat room that night. I'm glad I left. I'm glad I didn't talk over everything. Like I left in the crank it up segments there during the race because people seem to really enjoy that during the chat room segment and cranking that up during there. I did leave the music in there, but I'm glad that the sound kind of drowns that out a little bit. I kind of adjusted that a little bit so the music wouldn't impinge and just get too obnoxious. I fretted about the volume levels in a lot of this and trying to balance things out a little bit and make it sound a little bit better. I didn't want the music to just blast your ears out. Like, I mean, I do that enough in the Field Fillers series already, but at least with the opening of it. But trying something different with that too. And again, big thanks to Roman Sinek at Sergio Productions out there for the music. I think he does a fantastic job on that. If you haven't checked out his channel, definitely give it a look. I think the links are in the description for each of the episodes there too. But yeah, it was kind of it was interesting how that's all that came together. But yeah, you guys have any? I'm seeing some questions here in the chat already. But if you guys if you have any other questions here on the video, definitely let me know, and we'll cover that here on the show tonight. Pretty loose format here today. I got some things for show and tell here for you guys, and we'll do some trivia segments here towards the end of the show as well. And hopefully I will stop coughing. Alrighty. Let's see. Looking at where we got here. Jason Combs, I'm seeing your question on that. What was the reasoning as to why Fox pulled the credentials for other networks? Seemed kind of petty on their part. Good question, Jason. I kind of brought that up very briefly in part two, but basically what it came down to was the exclusivity agreements that Fox entered into. When they brought Fox, when NASCAR signed that agreement with Fox and NBC, and you always watch the Indies broadcast and they talk about the use of any footage is strictly prohibited and all that, and of course, people listen to that to any number of degrees. I guess that was the effect of that with other networks. That really, they spent billions of dollars on doing this. It wasn't simply a fact of having the rights to broadcast the races. It was also, at the rights at the exclusion of the previous backers. So even though ESPN was there to cover the Truck Series and the IROC Series events, it was still something where they were just treated exclusively. Like if it wasn't part of their thing, they didn't even bring it up, which is, I think, why they scheduled the Truck Series and the IROC events on the same day, so it could be kind of quarantined in its own little section. I'm kind of surprised that they had the interview with Willie T. Ribbs before the Truck Series race, because that's about the only mention that I ever really saw during the broadcast of the Truck Series race, and which is kind of interesting at that point there. And certainly, no mention of the IROC race, even with the amazing move that Dale Earnhardt pulls off in that event too. It's kind of amazing that doesn't even play into any of the other aspects of their broadcast. But that was really what it comes down to on that. You have a situation where a lot of these different networks were not allowed to do what they could do. And this is something else that I guess you'll see it a bit in part 3 as well. Where the other broadcast networks, they would have reporters that, I see this is mentioned in the chat too. Yeah. That's exactly true. You had reporters for these networks, would be stationed outside the tracks, or I remember distinctly watching their RPM Tonight and that week. And that was always a great, show, because you always had like Reese Davis and these other guys, and they'd like commentate over the clips. They would have fit in perfectly in the YouTube era here today. You probably get something closer to like urinating tree kind of experience or something from that. But and always in good fun, in the same sense. But during 2001, they just had to use pictures, which was really strange. So they just had like their photographers, and that was about it. But of course, if you're having a TV show, you're going to count on it. Just, you can't just be a slideshow. And unfortunately, that's why really RPM Tonight, they lose that NASCAR coverage. NASCAR is still as popular as ever in the early 2000s. You lose that. And even though you could cover like IndyCar or the Truck Series or any of the other stuff, it just didn't really sustain as much without having that Winston Cup coverage on there. And, unfortunately, you lose RPM Tonight a couple of years later. Inside Winston Cup Racing was kind of changed a couple ways over. I mean, they stayed a bit longer. Alan Bestwick kind of came on around that time there too. And, of course, I guess Bestwick was on a little bit earlier. I think in 99 he was on there. Their history is a little bit harder to track. I ended up having to change the script a little bit because that show didn't really fall off the air. I mean, they were still on the air, well into the early 2000s. It just kind of worked things out in that sense. And then I guess Fox taking over Speed Vision and ultimately coming FS1 probably had a role in that too. But there's that kind of deal too. But yeah, and Fox had their own post-race shows. I mean, NASCAR Victory Lane, NASCAR, I think Totally NASCAR was the other show they had. I think, and I believe there was a NASCAR This Morning, which basically, these are all like ripoffs of, things that ESPN already had. They had RPM Tonight, RPM Today, things of that nature, and then just trying to use their own branding in there. So that's basically what it comes down to. Short answer for a long answer there, kind of played out that way. Kevin Odell, do you think 2001 would have been Earnhardt's 8th championship? Very possibly. Certainly given what did happen later that year with the number 29 team with Harvick, it could certainly be argued that, he would have been a contender there. With Jeff Gordon doing as well as he did, it would have been interesting to see if it was going to be another 1995 where the two of them were going to have a bit of a war of attrition there towards the end of the year. Hard to say if he would have won the same number of races that Harvick would have. Or if those would have played out another way. I mean, that's just such a big divergence in the sport, But I think if he was able to keep the same mental attitude and the same health that he had going into the 2001 Daytona 500, yeah, I think the sky's the limit. And he didn't really have that even in the 2000 season. He was getting his feet back under him because he had the injury in '99, had the surgery there. I believe it was on his neck, and came back into the sport and was second in points. In a year where Bobby Labonte was just brutally consistent. I mean, basically, Labonte's season in 2000 and Dale Jarrett's in 1999 were very hard for everybody else to compete with. I think they just found whatever model that Jeff Gordon worked out in 1998. But they didn't win nearly as much as Gordon did in 98, and yet they won such dominating championships in both of those seasons. I touch on that a little bit in part one there about the 2000 season. But even then, you see kind of the gap between the different wins that Bobby Labonte had in his season that year. But sometimes that just kind of plays out that way. But I think that's certainly one way you can kind of look at it too. There we go. Yeah. Oh, the news. Thank you for your comment there on the channel, on the show as well. Yeah. I mean, again, there's so much. There's so many different things that happened at the same time, and again, it could be kind of information overload. I was surprised that it was about 2.5 hours or over 2.5 hours when I was editing it there. I looked at a couple clips, watching it all the way through. I'm like, well, that clip could be shorter. That one maybe too, but I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of the finished. So, and especially don't want to lose the chat transcript from that one, because that was a lot of fun. I really did enjoy that. And I hope you guys did too, that were watching it there too. Yes, Kevin Odell, also you bring up the clip there about Earnhardt. We touched on this a little bit earlier. But yeah, the interview on that, I'm seeing there was a conversation on Reddit about this as well. I was about to dice that interview up a little bit, where Dale Earnhardt and Darrell Waltrip were talking about his helmet, and there's this extended shot where you kind of see inside his car. But I think that really just conveyed so much information in that time period where, again, you have a driver that is so used to just, doing things his own way. The open-faced helmet, sitting very low in the car, and seeing the setup in the car. I mean, I know there's a lot of mystery and mystique over all that. That's of course been, for good reason, from what happened at the end of the race there in 2001, and what information we still don't really know 100%, because it was all, very guarded secret there at the time. Certainly it kind of gives you another view there. I know it was a little creepy for some people. I get that for sure. And especially, I think in any sense there where you're seeing, again, the very different perspective of, Earnhardt, just as on a Fox broadcast. I mean, the fact that this happened in the first, televised points race that Fox had, it almost looks strange to have, Earnhardt's car out there and him on the track there at that time, because that change was just so sudden and so dramatic in that sense. But that's where I really want to kind of clip that off and just have that be in that one section there, and really ending with the Terry Bradshaw ride around the track there that happened at happy hour, which turned out to be the night before the 43rd Daytona 500 itself. I think that was a good place to kind of leave it off. This had pretty good ways of figuring out where the natural break points would be, and obviously you can pretty much picture what part 3 is going to be there at the same time. Let's see here. Vern, I see your question. What's Jeremy's team? A fairly new effort from Penske to get a teammate for Rusty. It was pretty new. The Kranifus team basically was what Jeremy drove for. Penske invested in it in 1998. That's when you got the number 12 car, the Mobile One sponsorship. Kranifus kind of scaled back his interest through the 2000 season. 99 through the 2000 season there. So it's basically just a standalone Penske injury. And it's possible that maybe that there was a transition at that point where, the video, the team perhaps was not, as strongly reorganized. I mean, you definitely see other engine problems for Robert Presley in this video as well. So maybe there's a connection there at the same time that Penske is trying to figure out what's going on, and they have this expansion team they're working with. Maybe they're just trying some experimental things to help Rusty Wallace out too. I think there was that one interview that Mayfield did on Junior's podcast that talked about Mayfield's team being treated really secondary to Rusty's, that it was only supposed to help Rusty's team. But when Mayfield was actually kind of successful in that car and winning a couple of races, that almost wasn't really part of the plan, almost spoiled the plan a little bit. I guess it's another way you could look at it. And maybe in 2001 was kind of a response to that. Hard to say, but it does look like he had an unusual amount of struggles that week, and that was immediately noticeable in the production of that particular episode. Let's see here. Superman 8. If Earnhardt hadn't died, how long do you think he would have raced? I'm not sure. I imagine he probably would have eased the transition into just being more of a team owner for DEI. I think if DEI was about as successful as they turned out to be in 2001, I think he would have probably stepped out of the driver's seat probably pretty soon, maybe a year or two. I think the real question is, do you think he would have done a retirement tour? Like you see in my video there that I talked about that, whether it was like Richard Petty or Darrell Waltrip. I'm sure the sponsors probably would have been happy with him doing that. I somehow don't think so. I think maybe ironically, he would have done more what Dave Marcus did, which is do the Daytona 500 and then call it a career. Would that have been in 2002, 2003? Hard to say. But, given what was going on there at the time, given the rise of the success of DEI and Kevin Harvick also. I mean, if Earnhardt hadn't lost his life, Harvick was already signed to drive that 30 car, and his debut was in Atlanta. Would he have had a good start there? Would he have, really taken to that ride as well as he did in the 29 car under very different circumstances? Hard to say. I mean, Earnhardt spoke very highly of Harvick. Maybe that wouldn't have been so different. I mean, I don't think it would have been exactly the same way that it happened in the 2001 season, especially since he was balancing the Busch Series schedule at the same time. But maybe it would have helped, and that would have kind of changed the trajectory of a lot of that too, for sure. Oh, Adam, yeah, thank you for sharing the picture of Joe Nemechek's car. I thought that was pretty cool. Absolutely. Let me see here. I had another note on this too. I wanted to kind of bring up. Let's see. Where was it? Yeah, Logan Detweiler, thank you for your comment there as well. I know we were messaging a little bit earlier today about the idea of doing other races with this same format in 500 days. He actually was talking about the 2012 Daytona 500. That was actually a race I didn't see live, so that would be kind of a weird experience there at the same time. But, again, nothing firmly planned on that aspect here. Certainly more focus on just completing this series here and seeing where it goes. But the biggest thing with this one is I really wanted to, I really wanted to make a big statement on this, and I felt I had the opportunity when the Stanton Barrett project stalled out for the Rise of the Field fillers back in the spring, shortly after the Hermes Sadler video was posted. And I know that's been a long time. I know I got a lot of comments on the Rise of the Field fillers this week too, so I'll touch a bit on that too. Yeah, it was it was definitely something else I wanted to kind of work on. And I thought it was going to be a smaller project. I thought it was going to be something smaller that maybe I'd get done in the summer and then post at that same time. But it just got bigger and bigger, and it kind of took a life of its own. And I guess it probably feels that way probably when you see some of these videos here, even from these first couple of parts. But that was definitely another part of that there too. But yeah, I mean, once it got to that point, it's like, okay, well, unlike 3 Before February, where I treated it just kind of as a long video, and then I had to kind of really re-release it to kind of make it feel more like a film. I wanted to kind of start off with the intent of making this like a film and then kind of go from there. And I think that's paid off pretty well. I wanted to kind of make it a little more polished and kind of doing that. So whether or not this is going to be the direction of the channel, I don't know. It depends. It depends on how well the videos do. It depends on, how much bigger the channel gets, or the Patreon. Patreon, we've seen a great effect on this already. Big thanks to those of you who've joined. I've already got a couple more mailings. I've mailed out a whole batch of stickers and newsletters this past week. I got a few more I got to send out this next week. Big thanks to everyone who's joined on that. I think that's fantastic, and I hope that they stick around when the season starts and we start going back to the last place coverage here coming into 2023, because that's definitely still going to stay another aspect of what we work on here in the meantime. But yeah, Brandon Justice, I like your comment there too. Would have been neat to see Rick Mast in the 3 car. Yeah, I mean, certainly a possibility. You never know. But that's definitely another aspect that could have turned out that way. The fact that he was in the running for that third Childress injury, but for one decision or another, it could have just turned out very differently. But I think that's why the silly season part was critical, even though that part of it isn't taking place in 2001 or at Daytona. I think this part here wouldn't have had nearly the effect that it had without the groundwork from that first one. So again, if people are watching the series, if they, could you skip the first one? I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, of course, I want everybody to watch all the videos there. But I think that's, you're not really gonna understand, okay, why is this guy driving for this team? I was watching it a while back. Somebody did a reaction video to the 2001 Daytona 500, and they're watching the starting lineup. And they're like, wait a minute, what's Stacey Compton doing on the front row? And it's like, well, that's kind of a long story. You kind of got to go back to what Melling Racing was. Stacey Compton driving for the team, how they got the Dodge support there, and what that meant, and how Chad Knaus was on the team. I mean, there's a lot of different things you got to look at there too. And that's where the silly season part comes in there. And yeah, you could have had one where you keep going back and forth and say, this driver is so-and-so, and he did this, and we start from there. It's like, no. Let's separate that off, and then we'll go into just, what happened from one moment to the next in the racing. And that was really the approach on this. So hopefully that pays off, and I think that'll maybe answer questions like that too. Beast of Metal, Slap Shoes also pointed out in part 3 of the Apologetics Tour that what really sunk Martin that year was that if he wasn't finishing top 5, he wasn't finishing the race. Well, I mean, that's certainly a good point. Mark Martin in 2001 was definitely, a bit of a hot and cold year. I wasn't sure. I mean, but there is kind of a larger situation with Roush in general. And I don't know if it's just that Ford, lost ground in some sense from how good they were in the 2000 season, especially given the fact that they've just run this newer model of the car for only its second year. It does seem like even during these preliminary events that they're just a little bit off. Of course, the drag numbers are definitely one thing you got to look at. The fact that the Dodge seems to have a pretty good advantage, at least from the one after the Budweiser shootout. There's different ways you can look at that too. But for sure. Oh, Ben, thank you for joining the chat here, too. I see you in the chat there. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I want to offer my congratulations to Ben as well. He's our new staff writer as well, our new second staff writer, joining William Saki here at the NASCAR.info page. And that is, of course, again, thank you to the members of the Patreon for making that happen. That was one of our goals to reach. I thought it was going to be a stretch goal that was going to take a bit longer, but thanks to this video and your guys' support of it, we were able to reach that. So big thanks to you guys on that. So our staff of 3 is locked and loaded here at the point here. So big thanks to you guys on that. Also, thank you for you guys checking out the eBay auctions on that as well. I wanted to play that video that I posted on yesterday morning. I wanted to play that right before the video. I was going to hope to kind of take advantage of that preview function they have here on YouTube. I thought that was pretty cool. So I think that I was going to have that play like right before the video, but I didn't realize that there was a 3-minute cap on that for the video. The video was 5 minutes, and I didn't know there was going to be anything I wanted to cut out of it. So just played it earlier in the day. But big thank you to those of you checking out the auctions. If you haven't seen it already, I'll post the link in the chat here as well. And I do have some 64 scale diecasts that I put up. Some from my own collection. Some I've actually picked up pretty recently, but all of them from the 2001 season. And I wanted to kind of start them off with very, very low bids and free shipping to make sure that those were more accessible for people that wanted to kind of add something to their collection there. And I'm so glad that there's some interest in it. All of them have received bids so far, which is great. So I'm glad they're going to find new homes here. And as well as the Dale Earnhardt one in particular, the Earnhardt diecast, the car with the Sonic Restaurants logo there that was run in the 2001 Daytona 500. Proceeds from that specific auction are going to go to the Dale Jr. Foundation as well. And I'm very pleased to see that that one has actually achieved the most traffic so far. So I think that's going to be good too. So big thanks to those of you. Those auctions are going to be running through Monday. So those will still be available if you haven't seen that yet. Let me see here. I keep forgetting this thing. I keep got to log on to this chat here versus the other one. And there it is. Okay. So let's see here. Let me check some other parts here too. So again, I have some things here. Actually, speaking of eBay, I found something else here just the other day. After bringing out the Stacey Compton hat, I found this on there. And again, something about the style of the 2001 season, and just I think another measure of how different things were in that time. And again, I know I get a reputation already for, talking too much about, quote unquote, the good old days versus now. But it's pretty relevant in this element here. You look at merchandise, you look at like the way hats look or way shirts look. So I got this one here with the Stacey Compton hat. I found the Buckshot Jones version of this, and look at this thing. You got so much more color on here. I thought they did a really nice job on it. You got the nice Dodge branding on here. I mean, I guess you still have some, there's some things that have changed a bit. I know that some of this old merch kind of gets the reputation of being a bit gaudy, a bit over the top, kind of too much. But I always think that these are pretty hip. And so I'm really glad that it's a nice shape here too. So they did a good job with that. But I love the details on this. That's why I was kind of mentioning in the chat too, that they really need to kind of reissue the hat that Earnhardt wore in his last race. I kind of hedged my bets on that one there too, because I don't want to make it sound like it's too, if that would be too tasteless or anything like that. But at the same time, NASCAR just recently reissued a lot of Dale Earnhardt merch, including actually the shirt. I think Brad Perez shared it on his Twitter feed, where it's supposed to be a depiction of the Goodwrench Chevy, but it just looks wrong because it's like on two halves of like just the wrong cars and everything. It's like, just reissue the merch that existed at the time. I mean, if you make the Last Kiss hat again, or, things like that from back in 2001, you'd sell that like hotcakes, and then, do what you're going to do with that. But you never can tell with licensing things like that. I mean, actually the McDuffie family is kind of trying to work things out like that too, where they're trying to reissue the old Rumpel furniture hats. Like they've issued ones that look pretty close to it, but still a little bit different. Actually, their crew shirts are actually pretty close to the originals on that. So there's kind of some interesting styles that have worked out at that point. But yeah, our senior still has a huge following. Absolutely. I mean, that's the other part of it. And you can tell already from the same response there in the video there too. Let's see, Adam Pell, I see your comment here. In part 2, you showed a clip that showed Dodge had a pretty big edge in aerodynamics. Were there any changes to even the cars prior to the 125s or the 500? As far as I saw, no. There was not an effort during that week to try to level the playing field. And perhaps that's probably reflected in how some of the race played out as well. As far as I know, there weren't any changes made. There were some changes made after testing, where they kind of changed things up for the Fords a little bit. But, and again, I think the other tricky part too, as Michael Waltrip mentioned in his interview during part 2 as well, that Dodge may have been, was clearly sandbagging during testing, that they didn't want to show how much speed they really had until it really mattered. And then, of course, Bill Elliott goes out there and wins his 4th Daytona 500 pole in what was, at the time, really the flagship entry for the Dodges. That number 9 car was everywhere in the advertising. The simple bright red, the white number, which at first glance, looks like the Melling car that Bill ran, years ago. I think that's what's kind of cool, that Elliott and Compton got to be on the front row, even if it was at the detriment of Jerry Nadeau, my favorite driver, with the illegal part on the car there and the car being too low. It's still kind of interesting to see, how that played out at the same time. Kevin Odell, why do you think NASCAR didn't implement the Hans device in 2001, especially with the death of Roper, Petty, and Kenny Irwin? I think personally, I think it's hard to point at one particular thing. I think it was a confluence of a lot of things going on. I think that there was clearly in 2000, I think there were 2 different problems that were happening. You had the problem of the stuck throttles, for sure, which were instrumental in both Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin's accident, not from Tony Roper's, as far as we know, but separate from that. And as we saw from Tony Roper's was, again, the basilar skull fracture, injuries, whether that was a combination of the rigidity of the cars, whether it was the inflexibility of the walls, whether it was the speeds that the cars were carrying in the corners, which is blamed by a lot of drivers back then, but I'm not sure how much of a factor that was, or whether it was all those things at once. I think that was the issue. I think that they probably, when NASCAR looked into things about, preventing the stuck throttles, or the the dead man switch that Mark Martin's or that Jack Roush's team was working on, where if it sensed a certain amount of brake pressure, it would disengage the throttle at that point. I think they viewed that as like, okay, mission accomplished. We fixed that problem. But it was really only half the problem. And that was what Earnhardt's really discovered there. I think that was probably what was going on. And I think the other reason is that the media didn't really hold NASCAR to account for that. You get the quote from Larry Woody back in 3 before February about the discussion of safety just kind of being secondary. And I think that was a consequence of this new TV contract and all this hype that we see during the week about, okay, it's going to be really exciting. This is going to be a really exciting race. This is going to be a lot of this. This is going to be that. You got all these storylines. And again, yeah, I mean, I get it. I was swept up in it just as much as everybody else back then. But I don't think that it lent itself to people focusing on the more serious aspects of it. I mean, you kind of think of it compared to the CTE controversies in football. And then there was, I think it was Nova did this documentary where they did a press conference talking about CTE during the lead up to the Super Bowl. And they had the press conferences and all the glitz and glamour going on outside. And then they had another room on like the same street where they had the press conference with, the doctors that were involved in the research. And maybe there's like 5 people in there. I think it was the same kind of situation. I think it just wasn't something that was viewed as, significantly in that time. I think it just got overlooked. It just plain got overlooked. And you see from some of the quotes from Mike Helton, there's like, okay, well, we'll re-examine this, but maybe a few weeks down the line. Let's take care of all this first, and then maybe down the line we'll re-examine it. I think they had a research and development facility that they were putting together, but just starting to, and they were trying to kind of get a lot of this together. But I think that at the same time, they didn't have any reason to feel that there was an imminent need, that if they didn't do something right away, something serious was going to happen. I think they viewed that they more or less had the problem under control, or at least in check enough that it wasn't a top priority above other things that they were working on. And I think that's true. And it's unfortunate. Does it rise, to any, I mean, hindsight is 2020. I mean, you can look at all this now and say, oh my God, they were, this is reckless. Why were they doing this? Why were they doing that? I think it's like the Titanic steaming full speed into the ice field. I mean, you look at that now and it's just like, what the heck were they thinking? But at the same time, you have to really go back to that time period and try to understand, what was rational there. But I do think Tony Roper's accident was overlooked in particular. I think that if NASCAR looked at that and realized, wait a minute, this wasn't at New Hampshire, this wasn't a stuck throttle issue as far as they knew, but we have, another traumatic brain injury. And I don't think it was even a basilar skull fracture, or it was very similar to it, or I mean, it was certainly a fatal head injury. So fatal head injury, period. That's already, serious enough that should have been treated very seriously. And I don't think that was fully looked at. And it's very strange that that's overlooked as much. And maybe it's just because it's the trucks. Maybe in their mind, the trucks are just an entirely different animal. You look at the Bodine bar and the discussions about, it's interesting that the Bodine bar and not the fact that they're running the trucks without restrictor plates in 2000 was viewed as kind of the cause of that accident being as serious as it was. It certainly played a role, in ramping the truck up into the catch fence, but the speeds were the other aspect. See, again, half the problem versus, the full thing. And again, it's very easy to say that now, but I think that's what was kind of happening at that time period. And it's unfortunate. It's awful because, obviously things played out. It was the absolute worst case scenario. And, it's, I mean, I've said it already in 3 before February, but I mean, it was, history, those that ignore history are doomed to repeat it. And whether there was a full ignoring of it or just like, okay, well, it won't repeat itself this time, or it won't be an issue quite yet. We have a handle on it and we know we can shelve it for a little bit. And they couldn't have been more wrong. But again, 10 seconds from victory lane, 10 seconds from the rest of the field reaching the finish line. They almost dodged the bullet in that sense too, I think Emp Lemon said it quite well in his video that, sometimes destinies are changed in just a matter of inches, or a matter of seconds there. And, it could have very easily been, one way or the other. But that's a story for another day, for sure. Yeah, it was a culture of the time. It's a dangerous sport. Exactly. Yeah. 8206. Exactly. And I think that's the other, yeah. I mean, and there's a lot, again, I talked with Derek Cope, for the book, and he wasn't really a big fan of all this intense focus on safety all the time. I think I think there's definitely a cultural aspect of it within the garage area, that, again, sport's dangerous and you can't make it safe. You can't keep it from being, 100% safe. But again, NASCAR, for one reason or another, they didn't have a fatality in a race, in a Cup Series race, since J.D. McDuffie in 1991, and it had been long enough ago that it feels like, okay, well, we got a real hand around it. This is how safe these cars are. Isn't it great that they're built as well as they are? Isn't it great these drivers, walk away from these wrecks, whether it's Rusty Wallace's flip in 1993, or Ricky Craven's in 1996, or any of these other ones. But sometimes you just can't tell what is, sufficient preparedness and what's dumb luck. You don't know. I mean, there's not any measure there. I mean, I give them the benefit of the doubt to an extent, but clearly when you can take a step back and you can kind of look at these things, you can say, well, maybe that should have been done here, maybe this should have been done there. And because, again, we see this just this year. I think it's a very relevant discussion from what we've had this past year. And the issue of this next-gen car and the concussions these drivers have had from backing into the walls in what seem to be seemingly ordinary incidents. Kurt Busch now being out of a ride, the last driver that ran in the 2001 Daytona 500 that's still active full-time today. Drivers like Alex Bowman, very young, healthy, but one minor incident in the outside wall at Texas, and he's out of the car for several weeks. This is... And again, but unlike in 2001, they're working on a solution. They know that what the problem is. They're trying to work something out, and they didn't have a worst case scenario happen those last couple weeks. I will guarantee you that the people who were in charge of the car or the development or whatever, when the checkered flag fell at Phoenix and everybody made it back to the garage area and nothing else happened there, I bet they all breathed a huge sigh of relief. I think that's why they came down so hard on Bubba Wallace for the Las Vegas thing. I think they were angry at him. It's like, look, we're trying to get to the end of the year without a serious accident happening. And again, Kyle Larson could have had a very serious injury in that. Bubba Wallace could have had a serious injury in that too. It endangered both of them, really. And I think that's why that played out the way it did. Again, it never changes. I mean, the sport is still a dangerous sport. And issues about safety are still as relevant now as ever. Maybe we'll look back at last season in a very similar way 20 years in the future. But who knows? I think that's another thing to kind of look at about that too. Kevin Odell, do you think Schrader will ever come out about what he saw in Dale's car that day? I don't think we're going to get more detail than, he would say. I mean, again, I think with matters relating to Dale Sr., I think, again, it's like with Kevin Harvick's interviews on Dale Jr.'s podcast. I think he's kind of the linchpin to a lot of that. I think if it's not going to come out through him, it's probably not going to come out at all. I'm kind of amazed at what Schrader has disclosed about it. I mean, whether you watch The Day or some of these other documentaries on the subject. No, I don't think we'll get more. But then again, I mean, I interviewed Jimmy Means about the J.D. McDuffie accident, and, he didn't know me from anybody when we did the interview, but I mentioned J.D. McDuffie, and right away, the first thing he told me was what he saw when he went and looked in that window when J.D.'s accident happened. That's, again, you never know. You never know. Maybe it will one day, but maybe it could be a different set of circumstances there. Hard to tell. It's a good question, though. And Jimmy Spencer was the last driver I recall with an open-faced helmet. Yeah, Steelworks, yeah, I think you're right on that, too. Yeah, Logan, I talked about the 2012 thing a little bit earlier, too. But yeah. But I think that was a different, with that whole time period there. I hope that comes across, because it's what I really want to do is I don't want to put this out there to say, oh, this is Paradise Lost. This is the way this is the sport at its absolute best. This was great, and what's happening now is terrible. Like, that's not what I'm doing at all. I think if anything, I think the understanding of what took place that week and the pace at which it took place and the context of which everything happened is not fully disclosed. I mean, I think if anything, the memory of that time is a little bit inaccurate. I think that's where you have to really look at this footage and try to distill the most interesting moments. So there's still a lot of moments that I didn't put in the video. One thing that was left on the cutting room floor that I thought about putting in there, there's actually a section where, you hear about, on the subject of people complaining too much. There was a section there where Mike Joy was actually trying to talk to the audience about not complaining about the the running order format with the taskbar at the top, the ticker. He was saying that there were examples where fans were putting tape on the top of their screen because they didn't like the ticker. They wanted the box. They wanted the scoring box or the little pylon like ESPN or NBC or CBS or other networks would have at the time period. They didn't like that ticker at the top there. And he was actually talking about, it's like, look, we're trying different things. We got different graphics. We got other things you may like. He was actually trying to sell the audience on this. And it's kind of an amazing thing because, I mean, how often do you hear with today, and now they have like that big box on the side, everyone's like, well, bring the ticker back. We want the ticker. I mean, that was really cool. And it was old school. So, see, that's how quickly things change. You know, I should have put that in there, but I mean, maybe I'll post that as a standalone video or something. But again, another kudos to Dave W. for recording and archiving all these videos from Speedweeks that week. I believe he had all those videos except for Happy Hour. I believe I got that from another channel. But yeah, I thought that was really, really pretty crazy there. So, you know, it's interesting how that plays out, because I think that could be definitely different. Yeah, the Fox tracks. Yeah, that'll come up a little bit later too. Yeah, that's a part 3 preview. Yeah, we're coming up on that. But yeah, part 3 again. Adam Medded, I see you were asking about part 3 itself. Yes, part 3 comes out next Wednesday, which is going to be at same time as the previous 2, which is going to be 8 p.m. Eastern. 5 p.m. Pacific. It'll be here on this channel. It's about an hour and a half long, so it's not going to be as long as part 2. Actually, it's going to be shorter than part 1 also. So if you haven't seen that yet, that'll be a different one to check out there too. So yeah, we're going to have more on that pretty soon for you guys. But again, those of you, if you are in the Patreon or if you join the Patreon at the $5 or up levels, if you join those, you can have access to watch that video as soon as tonight. Even after the show here tonight, you can check it out between now and next Wednesday. I'm going to pretty much set the premiere at the same time like I did last week, or this week rather, probably like Wednesday morning. So pretty much through Tuesday night, you'll have advanced access to that one too. So we'll make sure that's set up there. Somebody say they have a Jason Leffler hat. Steelworks, right on. Awesome. Thank you for wearing your Jason Leffler hat from 2001. I got to look for that. That would be great. That was another great paint scheme from that season too. Yeah, team ticker here. Yeah, a lot of comments for the ticker here for sure. Were ESPN or CBS ever in contention to keep TV rights after 2000, PB Waters? Good question. I don't know. It sounded like they were I think they were in the conversation. I don't know how long the negotiations actually went on. I mean, obviously, if Fox and NBC threw this much money into it, it must have gone for a certain amount of time there. But clearly, whatever their offer was way was at least somewhat short of that one. It's hard to tell. I mean, and it's very bizarre because even going into the 2000 season, you would think you were going to the 2001 season, ESPN and CBS were just as good as they'd ever been. They didn't cut any corners during that season either. I mean, their coverage was just as good. Great pit reporters, Ken Squire and Bob Jenkins, a bit older in age there, but just as good as they'd ever been. You watch any of those broadcasts. Speaking of which, thoughts go out to Eli Gold, who is, of course, the broadcaster for TNN back in the back from 1991 to 2000. Had his own period there in the sport. Understand he's battling cancer at the moment, so definitely thoughts go out to Eli. Again, another element of it. I think whenever there's 3 of anything, that third thing tends to get left out. And everybody always remembers, remember Bob Jenkins, you remember Ken Squire, but you can't forget about Eli Gold and the group at TNN there, whether it was Buddy Baker, Dr. Dick Berggren, and the others there. Definitely sending thoughts out for Eli for sure, and hope he's able to feel better very soon. Let's see. We'll do show and tell here in a little bit, and we'll do some trivia here afterwards. Wow, we're already up to the hour mark. I mean, that's how quickly it just goes right by here and talking about the sport there. But if you have any other questions from the video or anything else you'd like to talk about from that, we'll jump in here and do that too. Yeah. No, but definitely thank you so much for everyone for checking out the video for sure. Again, I never know how these are going to go. I'm always on pins and needles when these videos premiere. It's like, man, I hope it looks okay at the end of this here, because I mean, I look at these little moments, try to kind of clean it up a little bit and make sure I didn't leave any outtakes in there, make sure the graphics, it doesn't go black for a second there or anything. I fuss these things a little too much. I was Stapleton, 42's channel was marking on the video there, talking about the amount of editing there. And yeah, that took a bit. My original plan was, the other reason I did the diecast auctions, I was originally going to do that so it would be before Christmas, of course, so that people could get those before the holidays. And then that went out the window because the video wasn't even ready until mid-December. And then part 1 was going to be December 14th. So I was like, well, that's going to be too tight of a turnaround. It's not going to be able to, get shipped out that quick. So I know that feels a little bit awkward doing it at that time. But, again, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I took the extra time. I'm glad I took the extra time not to rush it. For one thing, when I did the original take of the Bud Shootout, I didn't. I still said Hut Strickland was in the 90 car when it should have been Ted Musgrave, and I almost left it in. And I was like, oh no, that's gonna totally screw me up, and it's like right at like a critical point in the video. So I immediately went back in there and trimmed that back in and put that in there. I mean, I'm still looking over stuff in part 3. There's one part I might clear up and fix that. Because I think there's, well, I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, there's one aspect of it, because I don't want people listening for it either. But there is a little thing in there that probably needs a little bit of clarification. And I think that'll be better. But I feel pretty good about that one. I think that's going to be pretty good. And it seems to be getting good response on the Patreon. So I'm pretty excited about that. But that'll be definitely one to talk about too. Uh, 8206. You didn't like the sound effects with the flashing yellow lights? I don't know. I think, well, yeah, if you had the sound up, yeah, that would be jarring. That's very true. But I think actually in hindsight, watching the clips of, like, I guess the start of the Bud Shootout, I think that was the one where I played more of the opening lap in there, and the all the little sound effects happen, like a little wish when the ticker comes down, and then the little boop sound of the light flashing. I thought that was kind of cool. I guess if you know it's coming, that would be different. Certainly if you're doing the crank it up segment. I remember they did, when they started doing the crank it up segment, they would always have a thing like, turn the volume down, they're getting ready to talk. Like, they had a little graphic for it. Because I guess what would happen is Larry McReynolds would scream something right then after that. And I was like, whoa, hang on, I got to turn the knob down. I mean, again, remember, it's early 2000s. So I guess you don't have the volume control quite as easy to access. Back then, I guess the average TV probably still had 7 remote controls. I know ours seemed to at the time. I mean, it's just technology wasn't quite as advanced as I guess today. I guess now you could probably get a control on your phone there and have a crank it down function there pretty quick. But that would be another one to talk about. PB Waters, I addressed why Dodge didn't field Busch teams in 2001. Didn't really talk about that. I wanted to make the Cup Series the main focus. For one thing, that's more my experience. I'm not as well versed in the other divisions. I have to really kind of brush up my history on those. So I'm not sure. I think, if anything, I think when Dodge came back in, they wanted to make a statement. They already were in the Truck Series. So I think they just skipped Busch completely. I don't think it was even in the equation. Now, later on, I think Hank Parker drove a Dodge. And of course, they had more of a presence. I mean, in fact, the last zombie Dodges we've seen were in the Xfinity Series. Last couple of years, we saw Tyler Hill drive one of them over at Phoenix a couple of years ago. So they eventually did get a presence down there, but not immediately. I think they just put that much focus on just the Cup Series and just those 10 teams and those spots that they had, and that was it. I think it was the same reason that they didn't have 11 or 12. Like, you didn't have, Jim Smith wanted to get into the Dodges because he was converting his truck team to Dodge, things like that. They just didn't want to expand any further than that, at least at the start. Carl Long, I think, was the first one to kind of broke in unofficially, but that was just because he was getting cars for the Petties. So things kind of started off that way. Crank it down, they're talking. Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, here, let's get into our show and tell. Let's see. We'll do trivia here next. And while everybody's picking which category for the trivia, we'll do the show and tell deal here for you, and we'll jump into that. No tires, just gas. That was a question. What was Fox Sports Net? That was basically like, I guess, prototypical FS1. That was kind of what it was back then. You'll see, like, also they had the, I think, what was it? I think NBC had their financial channel do race coverage back then. I think that was their equivalent. It's like their cable channel, basically. So definitely a different time period. I remember they used to play A's games on that here in the Bay Area. I had assumed they would probably have different games wherever your area was back then. Like if you were, I guess if you were in New York, it's going to play the Yankees or Mets or something. Or although I guess they had their own network, so I don't know how all that works out. Yeah, that was basically what that was. Let's see here. Alrighty. Okay, so again, we'll do the, speaking of the 2001 season, we'll do the late 90s trivia deal here. And again, the categories once again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So once again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories. So go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like. I will do some of that. FSN Bay Area, there you go. FSN Ohio. I guess, yeah, maybe I guess they did have all their own version. But yeah. TNA Wrestling used to be on Fox Sports Net. Yeah, that's another one there. F Mecca. Yeah, exactly, about Blaze Alexander. Yeah, that's why I definitely want to keep Blaze Alexander in the first part there, too. He popped up quite a bit in the storylines with the 91 team and so forth, keeping in the sport too, trying to break into the Cup Series. Okay. CNN SI, or is it SI, or is it S? Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah, CNN Sports Illustrated. Yeah. Is that what you're meaning there, Davey Height? Gosh. Yeah, see, there you go. Back, I mean, cable channels back then were crazy. That was a real peak of it, I guess. I mean, well, it's well before the digital transition in 2008. And then, of course, you got your Rokus, your Amazon Fire Sticks down, sounding older than usual here, talking about all of that. But, yeah, that was kind of the culture back then, too. Alrighty. For our show and tell segment here, and kind of to tie in with the auctions here, I went through my diecast collection and I pulled out my 2000 and 2001 diecast here. So I thought it would be kind of cool, like I did a while back, to kind of show some of these here at the same time. Now, it's a little tricky because this thing hooks upward to open the door, so we might have to get a little creative with the camera work here. But yeah, we'll do a little bit of show and tell on this here to kind of show some of the paint schemes here that you saw a little bit in parts 1 and 2 here. So we'll kind of do that. Excuse me here. I'm going to have to move this. Okay, it's going to be a filter on the screen there. Kind of turn these around here. All right. Let's see. There we go. Flipped over here. This is a pretty decent sized box, but it's still got a little bit too much room here. Alrighty, well here, let's bring our camera down here and we'll take a look. Make sure that cord is not too short. I think that cord is a little short. Let's untangle that. Alrighty, we're going to have to go under, over, and around on this. Okay. Try not to make you too motion sick here on the camera here. Sorry about this, folks. I want to get a little bit of cord. If I pull this, yank this thing out of the socket here, that's not going to do any good. Okay. Alrighty, well here, let's take a look. So first and foremost, on the 2000 side, of course, I have right on top, let's got the Adam Petty Kenny Irwin and Tony Roper cars here. Let me see if I can get a little bit more into focus here so I can see on the screen. The glare is still not great. Oh, there we go. It just pops right into focus there. So there you go. Again, I was talking about the Hot Wheels diecast the other day. It's nice. They have like this extra gloss finish. They didn't always have that. I have some Hot Wheels cars from 1999, and they didn't have this finish on it. And if you just handled it a little bit, your thumbprints would get all over it, and it would just muck the paint up really badly. It's like it was like a really bad custom job back then. But back in like 1999, I have like a Darrell Waltrip that's like that, where it's just all mucked up. But yeah, I got those 3 over here. So we saw a lot about Michael Waltrip of the Nation's Rent Car. And of course, there's that one with the Philips light bulb sponsorship. Great paint scheme. I'm surprised they haven't done a throwback to this one yet, have they, at Darlington? I think that would be a pretty hip one to see. I think that would be pretty cool. There you go. I like that they kind of kept the old Alan Kowicki font, or the Jeff Bodine racing font on this car, and the Nation's Rent sponsorship. I mean, there we go. Kind of bring it back into focus there. The sponsorship that was with the Elliott Marino team very briefly after Nadeau left. Dick Trickle tried to qualify for the 500 in it, and it didn't quite shake out. You got a Matt Kenseth rookie car here. Back then, didn't have the rookie stripes on it, which is too bad. But yeah, the 2000 season, yellow wheels is pretty hip. They didn't actually run yellow wheels too much on this car, at least on the Cup Series side, but came out pretty nice on this one here when he won the Coke 600 that season. We got, of course, the Cartoon Network car for Wally Dallenbach. Heard a lot about Galaxy Motorsports in part 1. Unfortunately, one of the teams that did not make it to Daytona in 2001 tried to get the Pizza Hut sponsorship on this car. Really a shame, especially since it was basically the last vestiges of the old Butch Mock and Bob Rahilly team there for the number 75. To not have them in the race, that was definitely one there as well. We also have a Dave Blaney rookie car here. Number 93, you got the old Amoco Ultimate Machine. Gold numbers. There was a lot of comments there about the 2001 scheme. Looked like they had the gold numbers at the start, but it was a little hard to see. It's actually a little hard to see on this one here, too. Kind of bring it in a little bit. There you go. But at the same time there, yeah, like the white numbers, I think, worked a lot better on that one. Jeremy Mayfield, we talked about the struggles that he had in the 2001 season, but the 2000 season, probably his best paint scheme. I don't know why they had the dark blue kind of run onto the front fender there. It always looked like the car was already wrecked. But this paint scheme here, I think, was one of the best that he ever ran. The scheme that he won California with had a bit of controversy there. Of course, the one that bumped Dale Earnhardt out of the way at Pocono. Great paint scheme on this one. This is also the version that has a little car cover on it, too. Definitely something that needs to be making a comeback here and is have the rain delay covers of these cars. They did those for, I believe, a couple of years. I think 99, 2000. Here's another one of those here with Kenny Wallace's version of the number 55. Bobby Hamilton took over this ride in 2001, the old Square D Chevrolet. It was kind of interesting with a lot of these different teams that actually changed drivers. They actually didn't change the paint schemes too awful much, but you had that one there too. The FamilyClick.com sponsorship. Talked about that with Kevin LePage. Apparently an equity investor in the team, Jack Roush was. They thought that they were going to have something that was going to be more long-lasting, keep the team with 5 cars. Unfortunately, that fell through. Hank Aaron tried to invest in the team. That didn't work out. LePage ends up without a ride, and Roush scales back to just 4 cars and keeping that out. So that was a pretty... it was an interesting paint scheme. It's actually kind of amazing that there was this much merchandising made with a .com sponsorship. But of course, history, once again, it doesn't always repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. A cryptocurrency that collapses or something of that nature these days. The predecessor of that for sure was the old .com bubble in the early 2000s. I do have one of the Robbie Gordon cars here. The rainbow paint scheme here with the Turtle Wax sponsorship. I believe he ran this one at Rockingham in the spring of 2000. Gorgeous paint job on this one. Hopefully it comes into focus a little bit better. There you go. Kind of has the last remnants of the Woody Woodpecker sponsorship. Not sure exactly how that came about. That was kind of a weird deal. I have a Rick Mast car, the number 98 car from 99, and it had that as like the primary sponsor. And that, I did mention this very briefly. Rick Mast ran that entire season in 99 without a DNF with the Cale Yarborough team. And then the team basically disappeared. It was about to come back with Chip McPherson, and it didn't quite work out. But this Robbie Gordon car there, very nice. I mean, there's a lot of these promos online. Actually, if you look on eBay, I believe there's a guy that has like about 20 of these, and he's selling them. He just had these little, they didn't come with the trading cards, but just the little promo bags. But a very nice paint scheme for sure. Also needs a throwback. Then, of course, we have the Jerry Nadeau Michael Holligan car. One of the best paint schemes of all time. And he schemed there with the white paint scheme on this. This one looked really good. I mean, especially when they started adding like kind of bright orange accents to it through the year. They kind of changed up the Michael Holligan sponsorship on the car. This is like the initial release that Hot Wheels had. It's good that it actually has the 2000 graphics for the Chevy nose. There were some other cars. I think I have it with this part here too. You'll see where they actually ran the older model headlights on these cars, even with the new bodies. Let's see, we saw the AJ Foyt team. Here's the return of them with Mike Bliss. Interestingly, it doesn't have the driver's name on the roof rails, which is pretty appropriate given how he was basically the first team owner to make a driver change among the full-timers in 2000 and really kind of started a lot of the silly season stories from that season. With the Conseco sponsorship that continued on into 2001. It changed the fonts of the number 1 a little bit when Ron Hornaday came on the team. Had a little bit more yellow on the side of the car there. Kind of an interesting scheme. You don't really see this kind of color run that often anymore. You look a bit further back, you think of a team like Harry Gantz or something of that nature. But that was pretty cool. Always got to look at the Kyle Petty paint scheme from 2000. Of course, the tragic season for the Petty family, but probably one of the best Hot Wheels paint schemes that Kyle ever ran here. Just a mix of different blue shades. There you go. Kind of see the orange track pattern. They kind of went from the nose of the car. Really creative. I mean, the Hot Wheels schemes, it was last year that basically they were a primary sponsor in the Cup Series. This eventually became the Buckshot Jones entry with the Georgia Pacific colors on it, but still just really nice back then. Scott Pruitt, this is another car that does not have the driver's name on the roof of it, and it turned out that he was actually swapped out for Ricky Craven during the offseason. Never really got another ride with PPI Motorsports, that is. He then became more of a road course ringer for multiple teams, most often with the Chip Ganassi effort. But again, the latest incarnation of the 32 car, which again, there was, I think it was a J-Ski article that brought this up, that it was the combination of all the past Tide Ride numbers, the 17, the 10, and the 5, the 10 and the 5 that Rudd ran, and the 17 that Darrell Waltrip ran, all that adding together. But still, it was very interesting that they would change teams completely and yet keep the exact same paint scheme that Ricky Rudd had driven, even the same manufacturer too. So that was pretty cool. Here is one of the first of those cars that really had the old manufacturer on it. It's a Darrell Waltrip for the 2000 season, but it has the 1999 Ford on the front of it. Probably is pretty much more like based on the promos that were released in like August of 2000 in Indianapolis, or August of 99 rather, when DW announced that he was going to be retiring in the 2000 season. They very briefly had any merch off of it. This is one of their premier editions. They actually had these really nice, even more detailed Hot Wheels cars that had a bit more detail in the chassis. Can't really see too well. Actually, you can see the bottom of it pretty good. Usually they didn't paint these other accents like the engine and so forth on the bottom. But these are like, I think these are comparable to a lot of the action performance diecast back then. They had an interesting box that these were released in. They kind of had like, it looked like the outside wall of a track there next to it. But they showed pretty cool. So you got that. On to the Petty cars here. We have both paint schemes from the 2000 season. The first half scheme right here. I mentioned online, actually. I mean, this scheme's kind of growing on me. I didn't like it really at the time because it just looks like a complete mishmash of stuff. But actually with the light blue wheels and kind of this nice transition on the back, it's got the old yellow bumper back here. It's actually not too bad. It almost kind of blends the STP, the General Mills schemes together. One of the rare STP schemes would actually put kind of the ring around the numbers on the doors as well as the roof. So that was kind of a clever change of pace there. Kind of prefer this over a lot of the more recent 43 paint schemes. And then you go on to the second half, which basically is what they ran in the 2001 season, although this still does have the STP sponsorship on the swoosh there right behind the number. As I mentioned in the video, STP did not stay with them in 2001, so they were not the sponsor on the 43 for the first time, and that was really a big transition, and we didn't see that really until then. And yes, absolutely, rest in peace, John Andretti, for sure. Kind of like this yellow band on the back of the car there, too. Kind of shows the scheme a little bit differently. Another of my favorites from back then. Here's Ricky Rudd's scheme from 2000. After closing his team and getting the ride formerly occupied by Kenny Irwin at the Robert Yates team, trying to break through with his first win. Didn't quite happen in that 2000 season. Had some near misses along the way, including at Phoenix, where he was very nearly going to win the race. Got in a wreck with Rick Mast down the backstretch. But then 2001 was a bit of a different story. Got his teammate Dale Jarrett right here as well. Dominant quality care entry, the 2000 Daytona 500 winner. One of the most iconic paint schemes out there. Glad to see that this has actually had some throwback schemes done of it, including the deal there with Danica Patrick a couple of years ago. A great paint scheme out there. This is one of the reasons I never really saw Junior as the number 88 driver in my career. Or in my time watching it. I was so used to DJ in the 88 instead. But definitely another example of it. Here is Matt DiBenedetto's favorite paint scheme and that of many others. Jeff Burton's X-Side paint scheme, one of the first sponsors in the 2000 season to really waver on if they were going to come back the next year, and ultimately did scale back by that October, which is very unfortunate because this is pretty much the favorite X-Side paint scheme of most people, really. Very interesting combination, the lightning bolt, the bizarre number font, the pink accents on it. Very different looking car back then. But definitely a very popular one there, too. Kind of get the old accents on that one. We got Mike Skinner in the Lowe's Chevrolet here, long before Jimmy Johnson. Of course, Lowe's was the branding there, the number 31 for the second Richard Childress entry. Skinner, the 97 Rookie of the Year, trying to break through with his first win. Came very close in Atlanta in 2000 before the engine let go. Came close again at Talladega that fall before Earnhardt passed him. And Skinner, showing on Twitter a while back, commented about the 99 500 when Dale Earnhardt didn't draft him and instead drafted Jeff Gordon past him, and was still pretty upset about that. But Mike Skinner, it's interesting, it doesn't have the branding on the back of the car. Kind of some, diecast back then had a little bit of kind of quirks with what brands they didn't show at the same time. Of course, we got Dale Jr. here in his rookie season. This one does have the rookie stripes on the back of it. 2000 Budweiser Chevrolet, or in this case, it has the censored sponsors on it there with Dale's name on the hood. I know a lot of people aren't fans of this. I mean, I've talked about this too much on the show here, but I never really minded this because I always thought they were kind of clever when they did it. Sometimes they put the driver's name, sometimes they put the team's name, sometimes it'd be another sponsor that was like an associate sponsor, but didn't get featured that much. I always thought these were kind of clever. So, and especially when it wasn't one of my favorite drivers, it was always kind of one that, I didn't really mind it that much. Here is a 2000 Joe Nemechek, the Oakwood Homes Chevrolet. Didn't talk about him too much in the series. Hasn't really made a lot of noise in the 500 days so far. But the Oakwood Homes Chevrolet, low-key, some of the best paint schemes, although this one has kind of the 1999 headlights on it here, which is kind of interesting. But this one is the 2000 version of the scheme. Had a bit more white on it with the blue numbers, as you saw in Adam Lemery's a picture of the side of the car on the wall at his place here. But again, Andy Petrie, I'm glad they kept the old Harry Gant number style there for a couple more years. Not the most successful team out there. But, you know, they made a bit more noise in the 2001 season. But that was a different thing there at the same time. And so we got half the way through here. We'll show you some 2001s here coming up next. Let's bring that right over. Alrighty. These are kind of... Uh-oh. Did we lose the camera? Hopefully we haven't lost the camera. Uh-oh. Hang on. A thump. Alrighty, here we go. Camera, where are you? Might have to plug this and plug it back in. Where are you? Is that it? No, that's not it. Hang on. Let's try this. Okay, that's not working. Camera froze. That's not good. Okay. Well, we're going to keep trying this here, folks. Okay, hang on. Hang on. Trouble off turn 2. Yeah, exactly. Come on. Let's try you. Which input you going to do? The old plug it in and plug it back in thing here. And now my mouse is drifting left across the screen. Well, that ain't good. Nope, don't do that. Don't do that. Mouse is having a mind of its own. All right. I can probably finish untangling this if it's doing that. All right, well, let's give you a radio show here for a couple of seconds here, folks. Hang in there. We'll try to figure this out. And then we will be back in just a moment here. Let's see. The sound is good. Okay, well, that's good. Well, I'm glad we haven't lost that. Alrighty. Can I get this plugged in on this side? I kind of used those up. Not sure if that's going to work any better. Let's try this. We'll kind of swap this input. And we'll give that a try. Yeah, we don't want to have... Okay. Nothing yet? Nope. Nope, I don't think it's hackers. No, this is probably this is something more domestic here. I think this is something just not working right. Come on, camera. Here, let's try this. Can I do external cam? Why is it muted? I wouldn't mute anything. Okay, let's try you. No, we don't need that. That's bizarre. Okay. Alrighty, here we go. Let me try the loading screen and then unload it. Let's see if that does anything. Nope, that didn't do anything. Shoot. The best laid plans. Okay. Let's see. Huh, it just kind of went out there. All right. So when you got two different USBs to go from, still frozen. Yeah, nope, it's still frozen on my end too, folks. Sorry about this, everyone. We'll hang in there as best we can. I think I bored my camera to death here with this. I don't know why. I don't know how I managed that. Well, let's see. Thrill and amazement as I figure this out. Nope, that one. Nope, that shouldn't do anything. Nope. Okay, no, we don't want that. Oh, hey, hang on. Hang on. That's better. That's better. Hang on. You fill that back up. Don't know why it went back small there. Okay. Are we good? We're good? Okay. I think we're good. All right. I'll wait for the chat to catch up while I do that. And I will now spill these all over the place, and that's fine. Alrighty. We're going to try this a different way, too. Let's do this. Is this going to show up better? Maybe this will show up better. Green flag in the air. Okay, you can see me. Good. How about this? There we go. Maybe this will show better if I can show the diecast here. Here we go. I need to just get like something that can just hold this in place. So, on to Robert Presley here, the number 77 car. Still got some 2000s showing here. Very nice on this. I need to get like a Lazy Susan here so you can kind of do the full diecast reviews effect of it there. But definitely another good paint scheme there. The Doug Bowell team switched over to Penske engines in 2001. Got a 2000 Jeff Gordon here. The last of the DuPont Rainbow paint schemes. Actually, why did I do it this way before? This makes more sense. This way you don't have to, my hand's moving and the camera's moving. Now you at least got like one thing moving. So you got like that. You can kind of bring that in a little bit. That's a lot of focus. There we go. Sad to see the rainbow paint scheme go. I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm still partial to it. I don't know. I got sick of seeing Gordon win all the time. You can pretty much guess that from a lot of the videos I posted. But if you see Jeff Gordon win 3 straight Sears Point races, that'll definitely do that to you. But definitely still Hall of Fame paint scheme for sure. Alrighty. Let's see. We got Mark Martin's Valvoline scheme. Very surprising that Valvoline would have a problem with Roush Racing, given the fact that they had pretty much the best brand exposure of any other company back in the 2000 season. Things just didn't quite work out for them on that end, and they decided to go someplace else. So you had that situation. Let's see here. All right. I think we're good. We still good in the chat here, folks? Hopefully we are. Kind of an interesting thing with this Mark Martin one here, too. Actually, I think I got this at a Walmart back in 2000, and I used to be in the jazz band, and back in okay, there we go. But yeah, in the band, we actually had one of our gigs that our high school had was at the grand opening of the Walmart, and I remember going in there, and they had since it was just a newly opened store, they had some 2000 diecast, and pretty much Mark Martin's like Valvoline car or any Valvoline car was always pretty much guaranteed to be like the first thing that they would always make. It always seemed like Racing Champions did that, and right up to the end there with them, I think it was the same thing with Benson when they put over the 10 car in 2001. That seemed to be the case too. Let's see. Here we go. We got Bill Elliott's McDonald's car. Always a shame that the 94 didn't pull off a victory, not for lack of trying. Probably one of their best paint schemes for the 2000 season here. Won a 125-mile qualifier that year, but it just didn't quite shake out. This is another one that doesn't have a sponsor on the rear of the car there. Service Merchandise, I believe, used to be the sponsor back there a couple of years before. But kind of perhaps a sign of the sponsorship issue among the other concerns there on the number 94 team. Another 2000 scheme right here. We got Jeff Bodine's number 60 Power Team car. This one also with the 1999 headlights on it. So kind of an interesting detail on that. Joe Bessie's paint scheme. Kind of interesting for that team that they would be in the Cup Series with more of their exposure in the Busch Series at the time there. But I really like, again, a few of these more of the Hot Wheels diecast from that season there. But they really show up pretty nice too. Let's see here. I can't forget about the other Michael Holligan paint scheme for the 2000 season. Jerry Nadeau's Coast Guard paint scheme that very nearly won the Coca-Cola 600, if not for an engine issue that dropped him out of the race there at the same time. Very close to beating Matt Kenseth. Kenseth, of course, going on to win that race and being his first career Cup Series victory. Still Jerry Nadeau's favorite paint scheme, at least from our last interview. That's what he was talking about at the time there. So, yeah, Jerry, if you're watching, definitely still getting you on the show here at the same time. All right, I think we're transitioning to the 2001s here. And look at the other McDonald's car. So we got Andy Houston, the rookie Andy Houston. And the second PPI Motorsports car was going to be Anthony Lazzaro, but he struggled too much in the 2000 season in the Busch Series, had trouble qualifying for races. Andy Houston made his debut at Michigan, got into the 96 car, and unfortunately that team had its struggles of its own during the 2001 season, ultimately clinched the NASCAR championship that year. This one does have the rookie stripes. Still no sponsorship kind of on the back of the car there. But it's still a nice scheme. And much like what they did with the 32, kept the same paint scheme from the previous team that had it. I don't know what the decision is on that or why it worked out that way. But I guess you can't improve on perfection. So, you have that same brand identity. I guess, I don't know if it was tied to McDonald's being this specific about the way they wanted the cars to look, or if it was just a lot cheaper for Cal Wells. But that was kind of the way that worked out. All right. Let's see. Oh, these are a couple of Earnhardts I had here to illustrate the difference in the sponsors here. So let's see. Here. So kind of little tiny details here. So here's the 2000 paint scheme here. You can tell that this is the 2001. It's got the Burger King sponsorship on the lower panel. I can't see that great. Can this get into focus a little bit better? There we go. Okay, so you can see the Burger King sponsorship right below the S in service there on the quarter panel. And also you got the NASCAR 2000 logo on the bottom of the A pillar there. So that was a sponsor that they had after Mom and Pops left. I believe like 96 or 97 came on board there. That was kind of their sponsor. But really amazingly, going into the 2001 season, and that's what this one here was made, didn't have a sponsor in that space. And so the first diecast to release, this was made late in the 2000 season for 2001, didn't have that logo there. Also didn't have the sponsorship from Oreo there at the same time. So that's kind of your other comparison. You see the comparison between that and the Sonic Restaurants version in the video itself. All right. We're back to... We got John Andretti's Cheerios Dodge here. This is the one without the STP logo on the swoop here. But again, a really nice detail there that Hot Wheels did. The glossy finish. I know a lot of people were expressing concern about like how big the decals were for like the grill on the front of the car. It seemed like the manufacturer had issues with that too, because originally the Dodge that you see on the nose was kind of lower on the nose at the bottom of the car, but it kind of got crammed into kind of like a tight space there, so you don't really see the graphic as well. But pretty neat scheme. It transitioned onto the Dodge, I think, pretty nicely. You kind of see the beginnings of the Richard Petty kind of swoosh that you see more in the some of the other paint schemes that they've run over the years, especially the Eric Almirola era there. Let's see. We have to have Brett Bodine here. Ralph's Market's car here got the sponsor re-upped during the season. It was the 43rd and final qualifier for the Daytona 500 in 2001. Great paint scheme there, very simple. Nice way to show off the branding there. And again, Racing Champions really did a good job of doing a lot of these paint jobs and teams that weren't that represented, and really kind of stayed along with that during even kind of the later seasons when the sport was more popular. Here's another version of Stacey Compton's cars. This is more of the traditional Racing Champions release. And again, with the censored sponsorship, not having the Kodiak sponsor. This one having both the driver's name and the Melling sponsorship on the roof of the hood of the car there. So that would be kind of interesting too. The 92 car, definitely another thing that was excited. It was exciting to see what that team was going to do. Chad Knaus as being their new crew chief. And again, didn't even know that they made the 2000 version of this car until the diecast version that popped up here a while back. Big thanks again to the gentleman that sent that over here. Definitely a paint scheme. I know that some people aren't as crazy about this one. They don't like the bright green or whatever. But I always like this one. I think it's not bad at all. Alrighty. Here's another version of Ricky Rudd's car. This is the 2001 version. Again, going to the kind of the tiny details here. There's the, I mentioned the really tiny UPS logo that was on Rudd's car. That's right next to the 8 here on this 28 car. Try to get it kind of in focus here a little better. There it is. Right next to the 8 there with the Back Tools logo. And that really kind of came on midway through the 2000 season, and it stayed over for 01. But basically the paint scheme pretty much unchanged from then, and the team stayed about the same there at the same time. From the Rudd one, we got Jerry Nadeau's next car, the UAW Delphi machine. The sponsorship that came on, Lowe's, was actually turned down by Rick Hendrick as the sponsor. So the Delphi paint scheme was run instead. So there's the number 25 car there. This is also another one that had the car cover on it. So kind of a neat detail on that. I'm still more partial to the Holligan scheme. This isn't the first scheme I usually think of when I think of Jerry's career. But of course had some great runs in this car along the way too. Trying to have a breakout season in 2001 after all the promise of his 2000 season. Here's another version of the Compton car. This one with the Kodiak sponsor on it. I will admit it does look better with it on there for sure. This one also is more accurate to the scheme that ran, where it didn't have a green hood, but more like green on the sides there. And the orange stripes on the roof are actually pretty nice too, to kind of accentuate that. The grills for the Dodge kind of blend in. Interesting, it says Intrepid on the front of the car instead of the Dodge RT logo you usually see on some of the other ones. But very nice scheme though too. They did a bit of a limited release there with the actual Kodiak sponsorship on the car there. Only a few more to go if this one's boring, you guys, but we'll wrap up here with this pretty soon and go into our trivia section to wrap up the show. Jason Leffler's car. I understand this one gets a lot of interest here on here. The number 01 Singular Dodge. One of the last paint schemes to be revealed before Speedweek started. Very nice version of it here. An update of the blue and silver car that was run with the Bell South sponsorship. The Ted Musgrave ran. Really like how this one came out. Very interesting paint scheme on here. Rest in peace, Jason Leffler as well. It was a great story in the first 125-mile qualifier in there. The Singular car had a very good run in that. Was drafted with Earnhardt a lot, drafted with Marlin. Seemed to have a good show going into the 43rd Daytona 500, and we'll see how that story continues in next week's episode. Let's see, down to the last couple here. Let me get these paired up. Here is another Brett Bodine. I got this one just recently. This is their promotional one that came out with the Red Cell Batteries Company. You saw the last Brett Bodine did not have the Red Cell logos over the quarter panels. This is a bit closer to the way the car looked in the Daytona 500 itself when he started 43rd and last on the starting grid, and more of a Hot Wheels release too, with the same kind of glossy finish on there too. Very nice how this came out. You got the Red Cell logos on the back quarters of the cars there, the car as well, after jumping over from Galaxy Motorsports following their kind of collapse during the 2000 season. We have a couple Sterling Marlins to show you here. The Silver Bullet, probably one of the more famous paint schemes there. Let's see here. This is also, this one right here in front is a little bit closer. This is the Hot Wheels version on the right. That's a bit closer to the way the paint scheme was when it was unveiled in the 2000 to 2001 off season with the number font. Still kind of closer to what it was run in 2000 and the years before. Then they went for kind of this a little bit different font that you see on the Racing Champions car on the left. Again, the name kind of blends into the sponsor pretty well. And both of them kind of trying to accomplish the same thing here. Unfortunately, that story is certainly going to be coming up more in the videos here as well. Right at the center of the Earnhardt tragedy, that bit of contact there in the final corner. But what preceded that, of course, was a tremendous week for Marlin, trying to get his first Cup Series win since 1996. Had a very fast car, won his 125-mile qualifier, one of the fast Dodges in the field, and that's a story that is definitely going to be much more coming up in next week's episode there. Again, revolving around the number 40 car. I'll kind of get the rear view of these here as well. So you kind of see a little bit different body styles that really both manufacturers made back then too. So very nice how those come out. All right. Let's see. Here you get a little bit of an idea about the difference in the body styles, at least in the manufacturers here. Here's Ward Burton's car, both as a Pontiac and a Dodge from 2000 to 2001. Yeah, I should have done this earlier. This actually catches the light quite better. So you got the Pontiac style on the left, the Dodge on the right, but keeping the same paint scheme. And the Hobus Pipes Associate sponsorship, the little blue logo next to the 22. Ward Burton, another one of the fast Dodges from that week. Definitely plays a big factor in the 500 story itself. That'll be discussed more next week. Very interesting that a lot of the Pontiac teams were believed to be switching over to Dodge at the same time. But that's definitely another one to kind of show there too. Oop, don't want to unplug the camera again. And the last couple here I'm going to show you. Let's see. We got Terry Labonte here. Tony the Tiger. Kellogg's paint scheme here, which is a special paint scheme in like the 2000 season. Ran as the full paint scheme. I like the orange a bit better. Still pretty secondary, I'd say, to the traditional Terry Labonte scheme from 94 through 99. That old Kellogg scheme with the angular stripes and the bright yellow and the to red, just absolutely distinctive. This one a little bit less so. Didn't have as much success in this paint scheme, but it showed pretty well there at the same time. Much simpler paint scheme on this. Robert Presley's 2001 version. Not sure why they went to yellow at the exact same time that they had the Penske engine deal there. I'm not sure exactly what the situation was with that. They run blue cars for several years before that, and then even before that with the other sponsors that they had for the number 77 team. But something that still stands out a bit. The yellow with the blue numbers, a little bit different from some of the other yellow cars in the field, your Ward Burtons and so on. But again, another great one the Racing Champions made, representing some of the other teams that didn't get talked about as much and drivers that were still looking for their first career wins. Let's see here. I got three more here for you guys. We got some petty cars here. The other two members of the triumvirate here. We got Kyle Petty's and Buckshot Jones's number 44 and 45 here. Again, I love how the coats show on this here too. I got one of the 44 cars here, a different paint scheme though, on the eBay listing there if you're interested in that. And the number 45 car here, of course, the Sprint PCS, the Dodge version that Adam Petty was supposed to run in 2001 before, of course, what happened. And then Buckshot Jones, the Georgia Pacific, always had a very soft spot for this paint scheme. That spot made even softer, of course, after Jerry Nadeau ran it in 2002 at Sears Point. Still a car that I think just looks great. I was really stoked that Joe Graff Jr. Ran that throwback just recently here. And the last one that we got here for you guys to show you. We showed the Valvoline car earlier with Mark Martin. And here is the Johnny Benson version with the bright orange or reddish wheels and the former Tyler Jet Motorsports entry. Of course, this now being MBV Motorsports, the teammate to MB2 Motorsports with Ken Schrader. This more the Valvoline invested team with Johnny Benson involved. This is the car that he would ultimately win his first and only Cup Series race in at Rockingham in 2002. In a slightly different paint scheme, but the debut of the Valvoline paint scheme with this car in 2001 and in the 2001 Daytona 500 would actually run the fast white car, the same fast white car from the 2000 Daytona 500 that nearly pulled off the victory there. So, yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that there, and I appreciate you sticking with me as the He had a little bit of a camera issue there, but we'll do some trivia questions here to wrap up the show for the evening. And let me make sure I don't unhook the camera again. And we'll get you all set in the meantime. Okay. All right. I think we're back. All right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna try to remember to do that and just have it on here. I need to get a way to show things on the show a little bit better, but we'll figure something out on this a little bit. Alrighty. So where were we with the categories on this? Oh, yes. I saw some questions about the next episode of Rise of the Field Fillers. So I do want to address that before lose too many other viewers here on the show tonight. So Rise of the Field Fillers is not over. I want to make sure that's very clear. I'm not doing this series of videos here that you're seeing on 500 Days instead of Rise of the Field Fillers. To give you the full chronology of things. So we did episode 9 on Hermie Sadler. I wanted to do an interview with him for that video, and that one already took a long time. You actually recall when I posted that, I think that was probably about 4 or 5 months after the previous episode I did on that. It was very fortunate that the previous ones came together pretty quickly under the circumstances. Most of the drivers and teams I wanted to talk to were pretty reachable, and we had a great time in a lot of those discussions. But unfortunately, the Hermie Sadler one took a long time, and then my focus was already on Stanton Barrett. I'd already got a lot of the research and a rough draft of a script done by the time the Sadler video was posted. So I had that together, but I still didn't have an interview with Stanton. So basically the rest of that year, I had a couple leads on Stanton, and we had some, we finally got around to an interview, and I think this was in the summer, and did a follow-up interview, also interviewed one of his team owners for the time period. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, this script is pretty much ready to go. Shared it with Stanton. He had some notes on it. Wasn't too crazy about the field filler angle of it. I really sensed from our discussion on that. And we still need to do a follow-up on that. I haven't been bothered. I didn't want to bother him over the holidays. So I haven't really talked to him the last couple months here, but we're still kind of figuring out where we're going to go with that. So during all that was when I was working on this 500 days thing. I really started that in April. And then by September, when we were having kind of issues with the script, I pretty much committed just to doing 500 days and say, okay, let's get this done. I'd love to have it ready by the season, when the season's over. I was originally looking at November for a release. That ultimately got pushed to December with the rest of the editing, and then got that up. So that's why, it's been a long time with Field Fillers. And I know a lot of people are really big fans of it, and I appreciate your patience. I really do, because I know it's been a long, long time, and I know a lot of you guys are anxious for it, but I'm very, very happy to say that we are not done with it at all. What I've decided to do is I'm just hitting the pause button on Stanton Barrett's one. Whether it's going to turn out to still be an episode, or maybe it's going to be an episode of the Driver Profile series, or maybe it gets used for another project entirely, that could still be up in the air. So I haven't given up on doing something with Stanton. I think it's a really rich subject. Part of it is really the amount of content. In our last discussion, actually, he was kind of telling me a number of different stories I think would make, any one of them I think would make a great video. It may end up being like a much larger project than I think a field filler episode could do. And I sense that was probably his concern there too. So that's why that's been held off for this moment here. I still feel like I feel confident in what I have, but I don't feel like what I have is the full story. So that's kind of where I am with that. At the same time, I have another episode of Field Fillers. I mentioned this earlier today. That is half complete. This was the episode that I was going to post after the Stanton Barrett one. There's a reason that I kind of wanted it to be after that one. That'll probably become clear once I post it. I may post that one sooner and just kind of get that one out just to show that the series isn't over with and just to kind of make that clear for everyone. What is complicating this is that I'd like to also finish the audiobook for Derek Cope's book. And that's something I'd like to get out of the way before the season starts again. I've reached out to my editor that did the second J.D. McDuffie book, and he's on standby and waiting for the manuscript to be finished. It's pretty much ready to go, but I want to give it some edits to make sure it's as polished as it needs to be. And doing the audiobook really helps, because when I did that for the J.D. McDuffie book, it really cleared up a lot of edits that just needed to be made, like sentences that needed to sound a lot better. So that's what I'm planning on doing pretty much once this series, once these are finished with that. I'm already kind of starting to kind of move things around on that, and you'll see some more information on that pretty soon. So I'll probably be working on that mid to late January and get that done before the season starts in February. One thing that I also certainly found is, doing the week-to-week stuff for the NASCAR site takes a bit more time, and it kind of slows kind of those updates there with the videos. So anything I can get done over the off season just makes things so much easier. So that's kind of where we're working with that. So the Stanton Barrett one, the Derek Cope book, are both kind of on, similar levels of being like pretty close to being done. But they may need a little bit more polish. But Rise of the Field Fillers is still going. And I actually just received an email just today about another driver and team owner. Won't say who yet, because I still like to kind of reveal this along the way. But somebody says, hey, basically, when's my episode? And I'm like, yeah, hey, I was waiting for your call or your email. So we're in the process of getting that one together. So Rise of the Field Fillers, the estimates of its death are greatly overstated. I'm happy to say that that's still going. So, but the good news is we now have, we have this 500 days deal in the meantime. I'm hoping this is going to calm some of those concerns, but I know it hasn't calmed all of them. So I want to mention that here on the show here at the same time. So we're very close to that, and we'll do that too. Where are we on this here? Where were we with No Tires, Just Gas? I think you were looking at the, I don't mean to put you on point here, but I saw you counting the votes there earlier. Do we have a clear vote as to which category? We saw 2 for tracks, 1 for everyone else, 3 for tracks. Okay, we'll do tracks here. We'll do some track questions here. Alrighty. Alrighty, here we go. First question, folks. Who sponsored the Winner's Circle at the inaugural Las Vegas 400? Who sponsored the Winner's Circle at the inaugural Las Vegas 400? Don't look it up. Try to guess it. Gosh, we're up to 2 hours. Okay, sorry, it's been turned into a long show here, folks. But yeah, a little bit of everything here with the discussion of 500 days and kind of the diecast show and tell here. CPTNCRZY86. I like your comment there about how Eli Gold pronounced Joe's last name is still iconic over 20 years later. Yeah, Joe Nemechek. I still like that myself. I know Nemechek sounds more like nematode, or it's maybe more accurate. I'm trying to remember how Joe actually pronounces it. It's one of those Eric Almirola kind of things. But I like Nemechek. I kind of like that. I think I still said it that way in the end of part 2. That was another kind of weird thing with part 2. I was thrown off by how uneventful the Busch Series race was that week. I was watching that to get notes on it, and it was actually kind of challenging. Some of the clips were kind of hard to figure out what would be a good start and finish there, because there weren't that many passes for the lead. I think it was a perfect, it really captured the difference between the 2000 aero package and 2001. And it really showed the need for changing it. I know this got questioned quite a bit after the race, for sure. And you get things like the yellow line rule and other changes that were made along the way. But yeah, I was kind of surprised that Busch race wasn't as competitive as I thought. I didn't really have a clear memory of it, and I guess that's probably why. But a very, very different show from what was seen in the first part of the Daytona 500, for sure. And I think that'll be very clear once we get to part 3 next week. The question once again is, who sponsored the Winner's Circle at the inaugural Las Vegas 400? Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, Viagra, Valvoline, the Orleans, Del Hayes, Samstown. Alrighty. Who sponsored the winner's circle at the inaugural Las Vegas 400? And the answer is McDonald's. Somebody say McDonald's. McDonald's is the correct answer. Beanboy89, thank you for watching part 2. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Showcasing movie paint schemes, no tires, just gas. That's interesting. You know, I was interested in how Dale Jr. mentioned that in the Brian France interview. I actually thought that was, I didn't really think that the movie promotion thing was such a big deal in NASCAR, but it really was. I mean, you know, I think it's just because it happened so quickly. It almost felt like it was something they always did, but not really. Certainly not. That definitely came up more in the later 90s for sure. McDonald's is the correct answer to the sponsor for Victory Lane at the inaugural Las Vegas 400, or the winner's circle, exactly. All right, well, we got some harder questions here. Next question. Who won his first race in Bobby Allison's Mercury at Richmond in 1976? Who won his first, did I say race? Who won his first pole in Bobby Allison's Mercury at Richmond in 1976? So let me read that again. Who won his first pole in Bobby Allison's Mercury at Richmond in 1976? Who won his first pole in Bobby Allison's Mercury at Richmond in 1976? Yeah, Douglas Lintz. Yeah, were you the one that commented in the YouTube channel? I saw the mention saying like, look, post the third part of 500 Days tomorrow. I thought about it. I really did when you suggested it, but it wouldn't be fair to the members of the Patreon. They especially want to make sure. I was actually even notified that people that weren't members of a tier, they don't automatically get the tier benefits. So I really want to make sure they have a chance to see part 3 before it premieres. We only got a couple people that aren't members of tiers, but that's definitely one thing I want to kind of have on there too. And again, I want to extend this as well. If you're in the Patreon and you're not getting their benefits, like if you haven't, in a couple weeks, you didn't get, your stickers and your membership card and whatever else that I send out there, definitely let me know. Give me a chance that I can send it out to you. Cause sometimes stuff gets lost in the mail. Things are crazy right now, I'm sure. I want to make sure I get the stuff out of people. I had a couple people leave the Patreon because they said they didn't get their stuff that they joined the Patreon for. It's like, well, make sure you tell me, because I don't want to learn about it from just an exit interview. Definitely drop me a message or an email, and I want to make sure I make that right. Especially if you're joining that, you want to make sure you get your money's worth. That's definitely very important. I think that's definitely critical. So just kind of putting that message out there. In case any of you guys are in there or if that's ever been the issue. Who won his first pole in Bobby Allison's Mercury at Richmond in 1976? Dangerous AJ Allmendinger, Neil Bonnet, Ruttman, Bill Elliott, several others. I swear I'll have a pee out of a box soon. Yeah, whenever you do Beast Metal, yeah, no worries, man. That's the other thing, too. I know I have a number of viewers that, they don't want to put a mailing address in there. That's totally cool. If you don't want to join that, you still get access to the post, the Patreon there as well. I get that that's a matter of preference. I just want to make sure it's available to you. If you're interested in that and you like some stuff in the mail, I don't send stuff out, every week, but I try to send stuff out here and there, like the newsletters and everything. But if you're not comfortable with that, totally understandable. So don't sweat that. Who won his first pole in Bobby Allison's Mercury in Richmond in 1976? The answer is Neil Bonnet. Neil Bonnet. Glenn 7000, you got it. Jake Kohler, you got it. Neil Bonnet is indeed the correct answer. Oh, there you go. Actually, these are all really good questions. I guess we've just not done the tracks category that much. Next question. Where did Goodyear debut their Eagle tires with trademark yellow letters? Where did Goodyear debut their Eagle tires with trademark yellow letters? I'm going to take a picture of my workspace here. I still got the cars kind of laid all out all over the place. Looks like it's like a traffic jam or the big one here just kind of happened on the table here. There you go. I'll have to tweet that afterwards. Where did Goodyear debut their Eagle tires with trademark yellow letters? All right, we got Daytona and Riverside, Rainbow Road, Charlotte, Atlanta 92, Darlington 92 All-Star Race. Where did Goodyear debut their Eagle tires with trademark yellow letters? The answer is indeed Atlanta. Earnhardt Fan Productions, I think you got it too. Atlanta 92. Atlanta is the correct answer. Very good. Very good. Oh, now here's a really good one. I think I might just end the show on this one. This is an interesting one. Yeah, you know what? I am good. I'm gonna make this the last question for the evening. Last question for the evening here, folks. What race had only 5 total miles rained out between 1959 and 1998? What race had only 5 total miles rained out between 1959 and 1998? What race had only 5 total miles rained out between 1959 and 1998? Which race? 611 Hornet, I see your comment. Yeah, you're disappointed when they changed from cornflakes to frosted flakes. Yeah, I mean, it's a difference. It's just not the same paint scheme, that's for sure. All right, Daytona, Sears Point, Firecracker 400. What race had only 5 total miles rained out between 1959 and 1998? Food City 500, Dover. I'll give you an extra moment here to try to get your guesses in. An ancient race. There we go. We'll see. What race had only 5 total miles rained out between 1959 and 1998? The answer is indeed the Daytona 500. Only 5 total miles. I mean, the years kind of give it away a little bit. But it could have been a narrower time period of something like the Southern 500. So those are good guesses on that, too. But it is indeed the Daytona 500. Only 5 total miles were rained out from its first, 40 runnings? So there you go. Or first, well, yeah, it was 98 because its 43rd running was 2001. So there you go. It was indeed the Daytona 500. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for your support of 500 Days, Lost Storylines of the 2001 Daytona 500. Parts 1 and 2 are now available on YouTube, so you can check those out on this channel. If you have not seen Part 3 yet and you want to see it early, you can join the Patreon at $5 and up levels, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Otherwise, that part will debut next Wednesday, January 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll do another premiere like we did with the first 2 parts, and it will have a live chat room. I will be in the chat room, and we'll all watch that together. And I know that's going to be a challenging one, certainly. A lot of mixed emotions, certainly with the 2001 Daytona 500. I hope I have handled the subject as best as I can. Under the circumstances, the response has been good to the Patreon, so I'm fingers crossed on that. But that's really up to you guys. So I look forward to sharing it with you guys, and we'll check it out. So have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe out there. New Year's is coming up this weekend, so have a good New Year's weekend. And I'll see you in 2023 for part 3. So we'll go from there, folks. Have a good night, everyone. I just saw in the comments here, Ben, thank you for jumping on that. Yeah, the 1965 Daytona 500 was range shortened. How is it only that they only had 5 miles shortened? I don't think it was. Yeah, it was barely past. It was like halfway or something in that race, wasn't it? I don't know. But you raise a good point there, Ben. It's possible. We've had a couple of wrong answers on this, but I just want to make sure to say kudos to Ben for catching that there. Because, yeah, I think it was at least, like 20 laps or something. I got to look that up. But I don't know. We still have a margin for error here on the old Trivial Pursuit machine. Anyway, folks, have a good night, everyone.